I always thought rock bottom would feel louder, like glass shattering or screams echoing off walls. But when I collapsed in the kitchen that morning, it was quiet. No crash, no gasp. Just the soft thud of my body hitting the cold tile and the lingering scent of burnt toast. I'd been on my feet since 5 a.m., juggling Graham's dry cleaning, the grocery list, and coordinating our son's school fundraiser. My hands were shaking. My vision tunneled. And then, nothing. I came to on the couch with a blanket draped over me, the room dim, and Graham standing over me with a look I couldn't read. Not concern. Something sharper. Calculating. "You need help, Claire," he said. His tone wasn't gentle, it was definitive. Like a gavel slamming down in a courtroom. Help. That word rattled around in my ears long after he drove me to what he called a restorative wellness center. He said it was just for a few days. A chance to rest, to reset. I didn't argue. I was too worn down. Too dizzy. I assumed it would be a spa retreat with herbal tea and yoga mats. I had no idea I was walking into a cage. They took my phone at the front desk. For safety reasons, they said. I remember glancing back at Graham. He didn't flinch. Just kissed my forehead like he was dropping off dry cleaning, then turned and walked away. The next day, I asked to call my kids. "They're not available," the nurse said with a tight smile. When I asked again the following day, I was told it wasn't appropriate for my current condition. I was confused, then angry, but the anger never helped. They gave me pills that blurred the edges of my thoughts. When I refused to take them, they labeled me uncooperative. 3 days in, I asked to speak with Graham. The nurse who answered the front desk phone held the receiver for a beat, then said, "He's unavailable." He asked us not to disturb him. My stomach twisted. Something was wrong. I begged to speak to my children. I needed to hear their voices, to know they didn't believe I was broken. But the staff kept redirecting me with vague promises and cheerful sedation. At night, I'd lie awake, heart pounding, convinced that if I fell asleep, I'd lose myself entirely. On the 5th day, I overheard a staff member whispering about a patient who had been here for months. Her husband dropped her off, too, the aide said. He visits her once a year. Has power of attorney. That's when the panic set in. I wasn't here to rest. I was here to disappear. On the 6th night, something changed. A nurse I hadn't seen before, Yasmin, came in to check my vitals. Her eyes darted to the hallway before she leaned close and whispered, "You're not crazy." I didn't say a word. Just looked at her. I couldn't speak, not with the lump swelling in my throat. "They're not planning to let you out," she said. She slipped something into my hand as she adjusted the blanket, sleek and small. A flash drive. My fingers closed around it like it was the last match before the dark. I wanted to ask how she knew. I wanted to know who she was, what she'd risked to help me, but she was already gone. I waited until the hallway lights dimmed for the night. I pulled out the flash drive under the covers, hands trembling. It would take more than this to figure out the truth, but it was something. A crack in the wall. Proof I wasn't losing my mind. The next morning, I demanded to speak to a doctor. I made a scene. I yelled until they sedated me again. But I saw Yasmin watching from down the hall. She nodded once, barely noticeable. I had to get out. Not for myself anymore, but because something deeper had been taken from me, my truth. My name. My voice. Later that evening, I was led to a room with a counselor. The door clicked shut behind me, and the woman offered a warm smile. "Let's talk about your progress," she said, pen poised. I looked at her, dead in the eyes, and smiled. "Sure," I said. "Let's start with what my husband did while I was locked away." Because I already knew, he'd drained our accounts, transferred the deed to the house, and taken my car. He told the kids I was mentally unwell. And I hadn't even begun to fight back yet. They called it the Asterwood Wellness Retreat, but the only thing it offered me was silence. Sterile walls, floral artwork trying too hard to be calming, and locked doors at every turn. The staff smiled too much. The kind of smile that told me they weren't listening, just managing, monitoring, and, maybe, manipulating. The days blurred. I lost count after the 7th sunrise behind barred windows and those bitter, chalky pills they insisted I take every morning. I'd learned early on that refusing led to adjusted privileges, which was just a soft phrase for punishment. No phone calls. No access to the garden. No meals outside my room. One time I asked to speak with a patient advocate and was told I wasn't in the right mental space for that level of autonomy. Your husband signed the paperwork, the administrator told me with a sympathetic tilt of her head. He just wants what's best for you. Graham. I kept replaying our last conversation before he brought me here, looking for a clue I'd missed. But there had been no raised voices, no threats. Just that mask he wears when he wants something. I should have recognized it. I used to see it when he closed business deals, his face, cool and polite as he stripped the other person of everything. Now it was me. Every attempt to contact my children was met with a barrier. They're busy. They're adjusting. You need time to heal. One day, I wrote a letter and handed it to a nurse. She smiled, nodded, and tucked it into her clipboard. Later, I watched her slip it into the trash. No hesitation. Like I was invisible. That night I sat on the edge of the bed, knees drawn to my chest, trying not to unravel. I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't crazy. But when no one believes you, when the world insists you're broken, doubt creeps in like mold through the corners of your mind. I started wondering if I had imagined the burnout, the collapse. Maybe I had been overwhelmed. But would that justify all of this? I was alone. Until Yasmin. She came during the evening med rounds. A new face, her name stitched in cursive on her badge. She didn't treat me like a diagnosis. She didn't over-enunciate her words or soften her tone like the others. She simply took my blood pressure, scribbled something on her chart, and lingered. I read your file, she said quietly, eyes never leaving the chart. You weren't admitted with a doctor's evaluation. Just your husband's signature and a durable power of attorney form. My stomach turned. That's not possible. I never signed anything. She nodded, lips pressed together. It looks forged. But that'll take a lawyer to prove. She slipped a flash drive into my hand, so quick and precise it felt like magic. This has files, documentation, some staff emails, security logs. Afterwards, not what it seems. I couldn't find my voice. My fingers closed around the drive like it might disappear. Why are you helping me? I whispered. Because this place is a trap, she said. And you're not the first woman I've seen disappear here. She left without another word. I stayed frozen, hand clenched tight, terrified someone would discover the device before I could hide it. I finally shoved it into the lining of the pillowcase, my heart thudding in my chest like it was trying to break free of my ribcage. The next few days I played the game. Smiled during group therapy. Nodded along with my assigned counselor. Took the pills and tucked them under my tongue to spit out later. I studied every hallway, every exit, every pattern of the staff rotations. I needed a way out, and Yasmin had given me the first thread. The nights were the hardest. I'd stare up at the ceiling, willing myself not to cry, because tears meant vulnerability, and here that could be used against me. But the truth was, the betrayal went deeper than Graham locking me away. He lied to my children, took my car, changed the deed to our house, drained our accounts. I was erased, reduced to a concern on someone else's clipboard. But he made one mistake. He didn't bury me deep enough. Now I had a spark. The flash drive. Yasmin's warning. And somewhere deep inside me, the part of me that used to build things from scratch, that ran bake sales and solved crises without ever asking for help, that version of me was stirring. They thought I'd fade into the beige wallpaper. But I was learning their schedule, their system, their weak points. And when I left, I wouldn't crawl. I'd burn every lie down behind me. I woke up with my plan fully formed, as if it had threaded itself together while I slept. For the first time in weeks, the morning light didn't feel like a spotlight on my cage, it felt like a countdown. Yasmin's flash drive had shown me everything. Graham had forged my signature on a durable power of attorney, and with that single act, he'd erased my autonomy. He made decisions for my life, my body, my bank accounts, and no one in this place questioned it. That power was now my prison. But not for long. I met with Marina over a decade ago when our kids were in swim lessons together. We'd bonded over dry towels, shared thermoses of bad coffee, and whispered about our husbands in the bleachers. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but I remembered her number. More importantly, I remembered her loyalty. She worked in legal administration, and if anyone could help me disappear, it was her. Yasmin made the call for me, using a burner phone during her lunch break. The message was simple: Claire needs you. If you believe she's not crazy, meet her on Route 7 behind the old rest stop in 3 nights. Marina didn't ask questions. She just said, "Got it." The night of my escape, I rehearsed every step with brutal precision. I faked a breakdown just after dinner, screaming that someone was watching me through the vents. I knocked over a chair and slammed my fists into the wall until they brought in the sedatives. But I'd already tampered with my evening dose. Yasmin had helped me switch the pills earlier that day, sleight of hand behind the water cup. They'd think I was unconscious within minutes. I had a narrow window and I intended to sprint through it. I waited until the nurse left the room. My limbs were heavy, but adrenaline pulsed harder than the lingering drugs. I grabbed the emergency call button and jammed it under the radiator until sparks flew. Smoke began to curl into the air. The alarm wasn't immediate, it gave me just enough time. I slipped into the hallway wearing the aide scrubs Yasmin had hidden in the laundry room. A cap covered my hair. I moved fast, head down, like I belonged. The smoke alarms finally blared. Red lights flashed. Staff and patients poured into the halls in chaos. In the confusion, I ducked into the stairwell and ran. I hit the bottom floor with a force that sent pain shooting up my legs, but I didn't stop. Yasmin had left a keycard under the potted plant by the back door. I grabbed it, heart hammering, and swiped the exit lock. The night air hit me like a slap. I ran across the gravel, tears streaking down my face from the smoke and the wind and the sheer terror of being caught. Every shadow felt like a threat, every sound like a shout of discovery. But I kept going. I didn't look back. Not once. Marina was waiting in a dark sedan, engine running. She barely let me close the door before peeling away from the roadside. "You look like hell," she said. "I'm supposed to," I gasped. We drove in silence for a long while. I stared at the rearview mirror the whole time, half expecting flashing lights or a black SUV to appear. But nothing came, only the night swallowing the road behind us. At her apartment, Marina handed me a burner phone and a laptop. "You need to disappear," she said. "A new name. A new everything." I nodded, already stripping away the remnants of my old life in my head. Claire Dalton was dead the moment Graham declared her insane and had her locked up. I needed to become someone he'd never recognize. We dyed my hair. I changed into clothes that didn't feel like mine, ripped jeans, a navy hoodie, boots that didn't pinch. Marina handed me a mirror. I looked at the woman staring back at me, hollowed eyes, thinner face, a spark where despair used to live. I didn't know her, but I liked her. I spent that night in Marina's guest room, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Graham's face. The smug confidence. The certainty that I would break. That I'd stay quiet. That I'd disappear without a fight. Before dawn, I took out a piece of paper and wrote a note in big, block letters. "Nothing left to offer? Watch me." Marina mailed it for me, addressed to our house, no return address. I pictured Graham reading it, rage boiling just under the surface of his polished exterior. I wanted him to feel the same powerlessness he'd sentenced me to. And I wanted him to wonder where I was, who I'd become, and when I'd return. Because I wasn't gone. I was rebuilding. Smarter. Sharper. Stronger. And I would make sure he regretted underestimating me for the rest of his life. Disappearing wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. People think the world watches everything, that technology has made us visible at all times. But that only applies if someone's actually looking for you. Graham wasn't. He thought I was locked away, drooling into a pillow and whispering nonsense in a sterile room. He didn't believe I had the will to escape, much less the strength to rebuild. After the first week in hiding, I became someone else. A woman with no past, no social media, no bank records. I rented a tiny apartment under Marina's cousin's name and used a prepaid phone that I kept powered off unless absolutely necessary. I cooked my own food, paid everything in cash, and didn't so much as glance in the mirror for longer than a few seconds. I couldn't afford sentimentality. Not when I was rebuilding from ground zero. But what Graham had stolen in money, I had in something he could never buy: skill. Before I met him, I'd studied design. Logos, layouts, branding, those were my language once. It had all been pushed aside after marriage, sacrificed for the family he insisted he'd support. But I still remembered the principles. The rhythm of good spacing. The weight of white space. And late at night, when the apartment was silent except for the hum of the fridge, I'd sit at the laptop Marina gave me and create. At first, it was simple. A fake name, Elena North. A new Gmail address. A basic portfolio with 3 mock projects. I posted them on designer forums, reached out to boutique agencies, and started offering cheap logo design for startup clients. My hands were clumsy at first. Rusted. But the muscle memory came back. The color theory, the typography rules, the way to make something feel like more than pixels on a screen. Work began to trickle in. Then flow. Then flood. 2 months in, I had a waitlist. 3 months, and I was fielding offers from influencers, consultants, even small firms looking for full rebrands. I charged what I knew I was worth and didn't apologize for it. I built a brand, minimal, sleek, emotionally resonant. I called it Silent North. And I never once showed my face. Clients never questioned the anonymity. In this era, mystery was a brand in itself. Elena North became a name whispered in entrepreneur circles. I was the woman who didn't Zoom, didn't post selfies, didn't collab. I just delivered flawless work, on time, and left clients stunned. By the 5th month, I'd crossed 6 figures in revenue. I opened 3 online-only business accounts using a legal workaround Marina helped draft. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving in shadows Graham didn't even know existed. But I never forgot why I was doing it. I wasn't rebuilding for peace. I was preparing for war. Yasmin kept feeding me information from Asterwood through encrypted email. The flash drive had enough to implicate the facility in holding patients under forged documentation. We were documenting everything. And Graham? He was spiraling subtly, but I could see it. I monitored public business records. He was shifting money, moving assets. I even found the press release for his latest venture, with a sleek new logo that I had designed. He'd unknowingly paid for it through a shell company. I laughed so hard I cried. Meanwhile, I gathered my arsenal. I saved bank statements, emails, copies of the forged documents from Yasmin's files. I pulled my old health records, therapy notes, proof that I'd been stable and functioning before Graham had me committed. I contacted a lawyer under another name and began assembling my case. Quietly. Relentlessly. This was no longer about escaping. It was about returning on my terms. And when I did, it would not be with apology or meek explanations. It would be with proof. With fire. With everything he thought I could never carry on my own. He told me I had nothing left to offer. But now? I had a business he didn't know he bankrolled. A following he couldn't trace. Evidence he couldn't erase. And one day soon, I'd be standing exactly where he least expected. Right in front of him. I always believed my children knew who I was. That even in my absence, my love would echo loud enough to drown out any lies. But belief is a fragile thing. And Graham knew exactly how to shatter it. The first hint came when I stumbled on a photo online, Graham standing in front of our house, arm around a woman I'd never seen before, a shallow caption below, grateful to have love and stability again after such a hard year. The woman was tall, sleek, with professionally whitened teeth and a hand on Graham's chest like she owned it. Her name, I would later learn, was Sienna. And my children were in the background, smiling. I stared at the image until my eyes blurred. My daughter Lily, my sons Ben and Caleb, standing beside him as if nothing had happened. As if I had never existed. A part of me screamed to believe they'd been forced into it, that maybe Graham had manipulated the moment. But another part of me knew that grief wears many faces. Maybe they thought I had abandoned them. because that's what he told them. Through Marina's quiet connections and some careful online sleuthing, I started to piece it together. Graham had told the kids I was unwell, that I had chosen to leave, even run away, and that he'd done everything to try and help me. He framed himself as the victim, the devoted husband who couldn't save his wife from herself. And they bought it. I found a blog post Lily had written for her college's Mental Health Awareness Week. She didn't name me, but the message was clear. Sometimes, helping someone means letting them go, especially when they can't even recognize how far they've fallen. My heart cracked down the middle. My sweet, brave Lily, believing I was lost. And not just lost, but unworthy of being found. Ben had posted a birthday picture with Graham and Sienna, captioned, "Grateful for the people who stuck around." Caleb, the youngest, was harder to track, but I saw his profile picture, taken in our backyard, the yard I planted tulips in every spring, the swing I helped build, now part of someone else's memory. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. I stayed up the entire night after that discovery. I scrolled through their photos, reread old messages, tried to imagine what version of the truth Graham had crafted in my absence. He was always charming. Always knew how to spin his voice just right to sound like a man with a burden. People wanted to believe him. But Lily, she had always seen through him more than the others. Even when she was little, she'd ask me questions he didn't want to answer. She watched his reactions, noticed the tension in his jaw when I challenged him at dinner. I had to believe that she still had questions, that something in her gut didn't quite add up. So I started with her. Not directly. I couldn't risk it. If Graham caught wind of me resurfacing before I was ready, he'd bury the evidence, poison the narrative beyond repair. So I created a new anonymous email and wrote the first message. Ask yourself this: if your mother was so mentally unwell, why did her disappearance line up perfectly with your father gaining full financial control? No signature. No sender. Just the question. I waited 5 days. No reply. Then a week later, I sent a package to her dorm, no name, no return address. Inside, copies of documents from our joint accounts showing the rapid withdrawals days after I was committed. An old design sketch of the logo I'd created for Graham's company, dated years ago, long before he hired his official branding team. And a letter in block letters written by hand. Nothing adds up when you start asking the right questions. I sent another package a few weeks later, photos from the facility, lists of medications I'd been forced to take, my signature beside the forged power of attorney. And one more line. Ask who designed your father's company logo. It was subtle, slow, but I saw Lily's posts begin to shift. The cheerful ones disappeared. Her profile went dark for a few days. Then came a tweet. Truth has a strange way of surviving, even when it's buried alive. That was her. I knew it. It would take time for her to unlearn the lies. For Ben and Caleb, maybe even longer. But the cracks were forming. And once truth started leaking in, the whole foundation Graham had built would begin to rot. He thought turning them against me would break me. But he forgot one thing. I am their mother. And I don't give up that easily. I had to be careful with Lily. She was the most thoughtful of my children, but also the most guarded. If I came on too strong, she might recoil, dismiss it all as delusion. Graham had painted me as unstable after all. If I wanted her to see the truth, I had to let her find it herself. So I gave her trails to follow, just enough to stir her curiosity. Anonymous packages. Hints. Photocopies of documents. None of it pointed directly to me, but all of it whispered a question. What if the story you've been told isn't true? The bank statements had been the first crack. Withdrawals within days of my institutionalization. Thousands gone. One even transferred to a private account Graham had never mentioned before. Then came the legal documents, a scan of the forged durable power of attorney. My signature, slanted and uneven. Close, but not mine. I knew Lily had once taken a summer job at a law office. She'd know that kind of power over someone else's life couldn't be granted so easily. She'd see what he'd done. But I saved the most pointed message for last, a screenshot of the logo from Graham's company, and beside it, my original sketch. I included one line, "Ask who designed your father's company logo." It was subtle. A breadcrumb, not a scream. But I knew her. She would follow it. A week passed. Then another. I tried not to let hope take root, but I checked her social media every morning like clockwork. Nothing, until one day, her Instagram bio changed. Just a single sentence tucked below her name. Truth is quieter than lies, but it lasts longer. My breath caught. She was listening. I imagined her sitting in her apartment, the packages spread out on her bed. I imagined her hands shaking as she compared the logo sketch with the official one on Graham's site, wondering why her mother, the woman she'd believed had abandoned them, somehow knew so many specific things. Wondering what else had been hidden from her. The next clue I left was a thumb drive with a few recordings, voice memos I'd made late at night when the world felt impossibly quiet. I disguised my voice, ran it through filters. But the words were mine. Sometimes a person who says they're protecting you is really just protecting themselves, I said on one. Sometimes, the story you're told is the one that benefits someone else. Especially when money and control are at stake. I knew it wasn't enough to convince her outright. But it didn't have to be. It only had to fracture the narrative Graham had fed her. Once the cracks were there, her mind would do the rest. And she was already asking questions. Marina called me one evening from a blocked number. Her voice was tight with urgency. "Claire." Lily showed up at my office. My heart lurched. What? What did she say? She didn't say anything at first. She just walked in holding one of the packages. Then she asked me, "Did my mother send this?" "What did you tell her?" "I said I didn't know for sure," Marina replied. "But I asked if she wanted to find out." I sank onto the edge of my bed, head spinning. She's scared, Claire. But she's looking. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, clutching the burner phone to my chest. My daughter, my brave, beautiful girl, was walking the path I'd quietly laid out. And Graham didn't even realize the fortress he'd built was starting to rot from the inside. He thought disappearing me would make the truth vanish too. But truth doesn't go quietly. It waits. It watches. And it always finds a way back. It was a strange thing, walking into the lion's den wearing a dress I bought with money he never knew I made. The gala was held in the ballroom of the Stratton Hotel, a glass and gold monument to excess that Graham adored. Every year, his company co-sponsored the event, an exclusive night for investors, clients, and social elites to pat themselves on the back and sip expensive wine. This year, the program listed a new headlining sponsor, North and Wilder Design Collective. My company. My creation. My weapon. He had no idea. I stood behind the curtain, heartbeat steady, fingers brushing the silk at my sides. It had taken months to prepare for this moment. I'd rebuilt myself from nothing, sculpted an entire brand, gotten invited to speak as a design disruptor, whose bold anonymity had taken the entrepreneurial world by storm. What no one knew was that Graham himself had indirectly funded my business. When he laundered funds through a shell company and paid for branding, he'd paid me, thinking he was hiring a rising ghost designer named Elena North. The irony was delicious. The ballroom was packed. Soft jazz played beneath the clink of crystal. Graham stood near the bar, wrapped in a navy suit that probably cost more than my entire escape plan. And beside him, perfectly posed, was Sienna. She wore the life I used to have, the gold jewelry, the rehearsed smile, the vacant admiration of strangers. But I wasn't bitter. I was ready. I slipped into the back of the crowd unnoticed, blending in with the flow of glittering gowns and tuxedos. Lily stood at the front table, scanning the program. She hadn't spoken to me yet, not directly. But she'd followed the clues. And now, she was about to see the truth revealed in a way that no lie could override. The MC stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat. Tonight, we welcome a woman whose creative vision has reshaped the way companies tell their stories. Please join me in welcoming the founder and creative director of North and Wilder, Elena North. My cue. I walked onto the stage under a wash of soft gold light. My heels clicked against the floor like a countdown. For a second, no one reacted. Then came polite applause. A few gasps. Then silence. I locked eyes with Graham from across the room. He went pale. His lips parted slightly, as if forming a question, but no sound came out. Sienna blinked, confused. And Lily, my Lily, stared at me with her mouth trembling, hands frozen over the program. I took a breath, faced the crowd, and began. "Good evening," I said, my voice even. 2 years ago, I was told I had nothing left to offer. That my value was exhausted. That my worth belonged to someone else's decisions. So he took everything: my name, my freedom, my home. A ripple moved through the audience. Eyes widened. Some glanced nervously toward Graham. I was removed from my own life under the pretense of mental illness, locked away in a place designed not to heal but to erase. But what he didn't realize, I paused, smiling faintly, was that he'd underestimated the power of silence. Of rebuilding. Of starting again, not as a victim, but as a creator. I gestured to the massive screen behind me. The North and Wilder brand logo appeared, clean, powerful, unmistakable. This is the company he unknowingly funded. The logo he proudly parades as his. The designs he claimed as part of his empire. All of them, mine. The silence was electric. Even the servers had stopped moving. I turned toward Graham fully now. "You said I had nothing left to offer. Tonight, I stand here not as your wife, not as your patient, not as your problem to manage, but as your reckoning." Sienna stepped back from him slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to something like horror. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away. I returned my gaze to the audience. There are women all over this world who've been told to be quiet, to be small, to go away. But we're still here, rebuilding in the shadows. And we always rise. The room erupted, not with thunderous applause, not yet, but with murmurs, shock, disbelief. And slowly, hesitantly, claps began to spread. A few people stood, then more. And in the front row, Lily rose to her feet, hands clasped together, tears glistening in her eyes. I met her gaze. She nodded. And in that single, unspoken gesture, I knew I hadn't just shattered Graham's illusion. I had reclaimed my name. I stood beneath the lights, the warmth of them catching on my skin like truth finally finding a place to land. The applause had quieted into stunned silence, a hush so deep I could hear the clink of a single glass being set on a table in the back of the room. All eyes were on me. Graham was frozen mid-step, as though moving might confirm what he couldn't yet accept. I adjusted the microphone, my voice steady as I leaned into the next line. 2 years ago, my husband said I had nothing left to offer. I paused, letting the weight of that sentence hang in the air. The audience was listening now, not just hearing words, but feeling them, many of them unsure where this was going, others beginning to piece it together. Especially the ones who knew Graham well. The ones who had always praised his charm but had never asked what it cost the woman behind him. He said I was exhausted, unstable, in need of help. I let out the softest laugh, not bitter, not mocking, just honest. So he committed me. Without warning. Without a real medical evaluation. He locked me away, claimed it was for my own good. Days later, he drained our joint accounts, changed the deed to our home, and moved another woman into our life. Gasps now. A few murmurs. No one was drinking. No one was checking their phones. He told our children I was mentally unwell, that I'd chosen to leave them. But what he didn't know, what he never even imagined, was that I wasn't gone. I was rebuilding. Quietly. Fiercely. I turned toward the screen again, where my company's branding shimmered like a signature across the ballroom wall. Tonight, I stand before you with a business he unknowingly funded. A brand he proudly promoted. A vision he claimed as his own. I turned back to the crowd and, for the first time, allowed myself a smile. And a name he couldn't bury. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. This wasn't rage speaking. It was clarity. From the corner of my eye, I saw Graham step forward, lips parted, eyes scanning the room like a drowning man searching for a lifeline. But none came. Even Sienna stood motionless beside their table, her face pale, her arms crossed. She didn't reach for him. No one did. I took a breath and addressed the crowd one last time. This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's been made to feel small, erased, or silenced. Every woman who was told her worth ended when someone else decided it did. Let this be a reminder. The truth doesn't vanish just because it's inconvenient. It waits. It survives. With that, I stepped back from the podium, the silence deepening like a held breath. Then Lily stood. She didn't say a word. She just walked up to the stage, eyes never leaving mine. When she reached me, she wrapped her arms around my shoulders, holding me tightly, like she'd just found something she thought she'd lost forever. I clutched her back just as fiercely. The dam inside me cracked, but I held it. There would be time for tears later. For explanations. For healing. Right now, all I needed was this, her choice to stand with me. To believe me. Applause erupted. Uneven, then building, rising until it filled every inch of the ballroom. People stood. Some looked stunned. Some looked ashamed. A few had tears in their eyes. I didn't need their validation, but I welcomed their recognition. Of me. Of my voice. Of the story I had pulled from the ashes and built anew. Graham looked like a man who'd just realized the walls were closing in. And they were. This moment was mine. Not just for revenge. Not for spectacle. For truth. And I had just dropped it into the middle of everything he once controlled. The morning after the gala, the world didn't just wake up, it roared. I opened my laptop to headlines, tags, screenshots. Keynote bombshell at Stratton Gala. Designer exposes husband's alleged fraud live on stage. My face, once unknown, once erased, was now everywhere. But more than that, the truth was everywhere. The speech was clipped and shared in pieces, the quotes searing their way across the internet. He said I had nothing left to offer. A brand he unknowingly funded. A name he couldn't bury. By noon, I'd received over 300 emails. Women thanking me for giving voice to what they couldn't say. Men asking if it was true, if someone like Graham Dalton could really do what I'd claimed. And then came the legal calls. My attorney, Mara Nolan, moved like a scalpel, precise, sharp, and utterly unshakable. Within 24 hours, she had filed formal charges against Graham for unlawful confinement, financial abuse, identity fraud, and forgery. We had the flash drive, the power of attorney forged with my name, the clinic records, the bank withdrawals, all of it laid out in a meticulous file. She also notified the licensing board for Asteroid Wellness. Yasmin had handed over her resignation along with a 30-page affidavit corroborating everything, the forged documents, the withheld communications, the isolation tactics. Asteroid was already on the defensive, scrambling to save face. Graham was no longer just a man in a tailored suit. He was a target under a spotlight. His empire cracked first in the media. Investors began pulling out, issuing statements about evaluating partnerships. Then came internal leaks, emails, Slack messages, rumors about misappropriated funds and coercion. The board of his company called an emergency meeting. By the end of the week, Graham had been placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. A polite way of saying they were gutting him from the inside out. And my children? They came home. Lily was first, of course. She'd been by my side since the gala, sleeping on my couch, asking questions that hurt but needed answers. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Were you ever going to come back if this hadn't worked? And most painfully, did you think I wouldn't believe you? We cried. We argued. And we slowly, painfully began to rebuild. Ben followed a few days later. He didn't say much at first. Just showed up at my apartment with a backpack and red-rimmed eyes. We sat on the floor, passing a mug of tea back and forth, saying everything in silence before he finally whispered, "I'm sorry I believed him." Caleb took the longest. He was still young enough to be tangled in his father's charm, old enough to feel the shame of being wrong. But when he came with questions, not accusations. What was it like, being in that place? Did you hate us? Do you still love Dad? I told him the truth. It wasn't just a place, it was a prison built with polite lies and locked doors. And no, I never hated you. Not for a second. I paused. But I don't love your father anymore. I don't even know the man I married. We took walks, cooked meals together. It felt fragile, like mending lace with trembling fingers. But it was real. And it was mine again. As the legal process moved forward, Graham's mask slipped completely. He denied everything publicly, called me unstable, again on live television, claimed I was seeking attention, revenge, pity. But no one was buying it anymore. The evidence was too overwhelming. And more importantly, I wasn't that scared. Silenced woman he once buried. I was a business owner, a mother, a survivor, and now a plaintiff. He appeared in court for the first hearing dressed to intimidate, dark suit, polished shoes, that smug smile still clinging to his lips like it had anywhere left to belong. But when the judge read the charges and refused to dismiss them, his jaw tightened. I met his gaze once, just once, across the courtroom. He looked at me like I'd become a stranger. And maybe I had. But I didn't look away. Graham was left to watch his empire collapse, brick by brick, in public view. Friends distanced themselves. His attorney resigned. Sienna? Gone. No public statement, no interview. Just a quiet disappearance from his life the way I once vanished. Only this time, she didn't leave a note. Justice wasn't swift, and it wasn't cinematic. But it was thorough. By the end of the month, temporary conservatorship was revoked. The forged power of attorney was declared null. And Graham was formally indicted. He tried to salvage something, his business, his image, even the kids. But it was too late. They chose me. And for the first time in years, I finally chose myself. A year. 12 months since I stood in front of that ballroom with the lights burning hot on my skin, daring the world to listen. Since the reckoning I once thought would never come. Since the version of me who was gaslit, buried, and erased clawed her way back into existence with nothing but truth and the will to keep breathing. Now, when I wake up, there is peace. I live in a house on a quiet street in a town where no one flinches at the name Dalton anymore. The front porch is painted sage green, and there are pots of lavender and thyme along the windowsill that Caleb waters every Sunday. The door stays unlocked more often than it should. The light in the hallway stays on late because Lily likes to read at the kitchen counter while I sip my tea. Ben comes by in the afternoons when he finishes his internship downtown. He's studying psychology now. I want to understand how people believe lies so easily, he told me once, not looking up from his notebook. And how we heal from it. I didn't say anything then. Just reached over and touched his wrist. I didn't have to speak. The healing was already happening right there, in the kitchen, with the soft clink of spoons and the scent of ginger steeping in mugs. My brand, North and Wilder, is no longer anonymous. I went public 6 months ago with a live interview hosted by a women's entrepreneurial network. The response was overwhelming. Not because I had some flashy pitch or glamorous origin story, but because I told the truth. I told them how I rebuilt my life from a borrowed laptop and a folding chair, designing logos with shaking hands while trauma hummed beneath the surface. How I learned the difference between silence and serenity. And how every woman has the right to reclaim her name, even if she has to invent it again first. Now I speak at conferences. Not just about design, but about recovery. About psychological abuse and financial autonomy. About the way the system fails women who appear too composed, too functional, too threatening to the delicate balance of someone else's control. There are women who line up after my speeches, tears in their eyes, clutching my hand and whispering, I thought I was the only one. They're never the only one. I still remember what it felt like to believe I had disappeared. The cold walls of Astorwood. The taste of pills I didn't want. The echo of my own voice swallowed by polite, practiced professionals who never looked me in the eye. But now my voice carries. And when I speak, people listen. Graham pled guilty to 2 charges as part of a plea deal, fraud, and unlawful confinement. The rest of the charges hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, even if the system couldn't bear all of them at once. He avoided prison through a combination of wealth, connections, and his willingness to surrender his business, his assets, and parental rights in exchange for a reduced sentence. He lives alone in a rented apartment near the edge of the city. I heard he's tried dating again. That he tells women he was burned by a vindictive ex. That he still believes he's the victim. But I don't think about him often. He no longer gets space in my mind. I've reclaimed too much to let him rent anything in me again. Instead, I focus on the legacy I'm building. There's a mural in my office now, painted by a local artist I commissioned. A silhouette of a woman walking out of flames, her spine made of blooming vines. Underneath, in gold letters, it says, "Nothing left to offer? Watch me." It's the same line I wrote in the note I left at the facility. The same line I etched into my story, my comeback, my every quiet decision to keep going when no one believed I would. The kids and I are stronger than we've ever been. We have traditions now, Sunday dinners, movie marathons, homemade pizza nights. They each carry their own scars from what happened, but they carry them out in the open. We talk about it. We name it. And in doing so, we take the sting out of silence. Lily once said to me, "You didn't just come back, Mom. You showed us how to survive." That meant more than any press interview or standing ovation ever could. Some days, I still grieve what was lost. The years I spent shrinking to make space for someone else's pride. The moments I missed while locked away. The version of me that stayed quiet for too long. But grief doesn't own me anymore. It's a passing wave. A familiar guest I acknowledge, then let go. And when people ask how I did it, how I came back from nothing, I always smile. Because they think it was a strategy, or a brilliant idea, or a sudden stroke of luck. But the truth is simpler than that. I survived because I had to. Because I had children who needed to know what resilience looked like. Because I had a name, even when no one remembered it. Because there is something fierce in the quiet of a woman underestimated. They never saw me coming. And now? They'll never forget that I did.